Welcome to the Exercise Solutions webinar on energy neutral training. I'm Ed McNeely, and I'll be walking you through this very interesting topic. Weight loss is one of the most common fitness goals. Probably 90% of the people that are joining health clubs are looking at this as their primary goal. And there's many different dietary and exercise approaches. You walk into any bookstore, or you turn on the TV early in the morning and you see the infomercials, you'll see that there's literally hundreds of different ways of going about this. And that's because it's relatively easy to lose weight. Most of these approaches work as far as actually losing weight, but it's also just as easy to gain it back afterwards. And that's where the big problem really comes in. And the reason for this is it really comes down to what happens to your metabolic rate with the program that you're using. And metabolic rate simply is the amount of energy being used in a given period of time. And there's several commonly discussed different types of metabolic rate. There's the basal metabolic rate, a resting metabolic rate, exercising metabolic rate, post-exercise metabolic rate. And you'll see these terms thrown around in different magazines and things like that from time to time. The one we're going to focus on most is the resting metabolic rate. And this is the number of calories that you burn at rest. So when you are inactive during the day, this is the number of calories that you're burning. And this basically sets your baseline for your daily requirement of energy, of food intake. So it's the baseline number of calories that you need during the day. And it's going to be affected by things like exercise, muscle mass, various drugs, genetics, and the food that you eat. So metabolic rate is a very dynamic thing. It can both go up and it can go down depending on these various stimuli and how they're presented to your body. What we know about weight loss is that it's a catabolic process. So during weight loss, you're going to break down fat stores, which obviously is the primary goal of the weight loss program. But you're also going to break down carbohydrate stores. There's going to be a chronic rise in cortisol and other stress hormones because your body's interpreting most weight loss programs as a period of stress and starvation. So it's going to respond appropriately by increasing the levels of these stress hormones. You're also going to typically see a decrease in bone density. Most weight loss programs will result in a decrease in muscle mass. And as a result of that, we're going to see a decrease in metabolic rate. And we know that this becomes a big problem because it's this decrease in metabolic rate that causes most of the rebound weight gain for people. And so we need to figure out some way of getting around that issue. So how do we, create a weight loss scenario without a decrease, without a change in metabolic rate? And it's actually not that difficult to do. What we know about weight loss programs is that there has to be a negative energy balance in order for weight loss to occur. And what a negative energy balance is it's just a period of time where you're taking in fewer calories than your body is expending. So that could either be, done in a number of ways. As I said, the food you're eating needs to be manipulated. The activity that you're doing needs to be manipulated. And how we go about creating this negative energy balance can really affect the outcome of the program and the outcome of the results that you get as well. So as I said, the relationship between calories in and calories out is what is known as energy balance. If you're in a positive energy balance where you're taking more calories in than out, what we typically see is improved performance. So if you're talking about somebody in a sports situation, we typically see improved performances when they're taking in more calories than they're burning. We see an increase in muscle mass. We see adaptations and improvements as a result of an exercise program. And in younger athletes, we see normal growth. One of the problems one of the concerns about, some sports, gymnastics in particular, figure skating as well, is that there's such huge demands being placed on very young athletes, and that the low amount of energy that they're taking in, this negative energy balance that they constantly find themselves in, actually delays their normal growth patterns. Negative energy balance, on the other hand, we know it decreases body weight and potentially muscle mass. It can delay the onset of puberty and may affect long-term growth in younger athletes. It decreases bone density, and this is seen at really all ages. So this can become a real concern if we're talking about postmenopausal women who are already at a greater risk for developing osteoporosis. So that leads to potentially stress fractures, early development of osteoporosis. There's an increased susceptibility to illness because there tends to be a certain amount of immune system suppression when you're in a negative energy balance. And there's all kinds of plateaus in performance, so you don't adapt your exercise sessions as readily. And in the case, again, of athletes, we find that their performance just doesn't improve. So they may be putting in hours and hours of training, but nothing is coming out as a result of it. So most exercise, or most weight loss programs, I should say, advocate the use of exercise as a means of burning calories to create a daily negative energy balance. So, and I'm sure most of you have done this at some point where you're hopping on a treadmill and you're trying to burn 500 calories on the treadmill to burn a few extra calories during the course of the day. Well, what we know is that when you create this negative energy balance during exercise, up to 25% of the energy that you're using can be coming from protein sources, and that means muscle tissue. Now, muscle tissue is the metabolically active tissue in your body, so it plays one of the biggest roles in your muscle mass or your metabolic rate. So as you start to break down muscle tissue and use muscle tissue to provide yourself energy, particularly for these long, cardio type sessions that so many people do in weight loss programs, you're actually going to see a decrease in resting metabolic rate. If you see this decrease in resting metabolic rate, all of a sudden you're going to start seeing the weight come back as soon as you get into a more regular routine again. And this isn't a problem just for, people, losing a few pounds to look good in their swimsuit in the summer or something like that. This is a problem for athletes as well. And this is where the whole concept of energy neutral training really came about. I was working with a group of athletes that were in a weight category sport. And so they had to get down to a certain body weight, and they had to do it without affecting their performance. And historically, what we had seen is in these types of athletes in this sport that they could perform really well if they were a little bit heavy, but it was really tough. Their performance never improved, and they could never perform as well as their body weight started to come down. And a big part of this is because they were relatively lean people to begin with, and anytime they tried to lose weight, more and more of it was coming from muscle mass and negatively affecting their performance. So what I did is I started looking through a lot of the weight loss research over the last 40 years and trying to piece together different things. And that's the interesting thing about a lot of this research is there's a lot of really good information out there, but it hasn't really been brought together into a more comprehensive approach. There's little pieces here, little pieces there across different disciplines and things like that. And what I tried to do was bring it together. So we ran a little bit of an experiment. We had these 6 women that were involved or that had to start getting their body weight down because of their sport. And what we did with them is we took resting metabolic rates, and so these were directly measured resting metabolic rates in the lab. And we took the first one in February. And so you can see here's their body weights here in this column, here's their calories per day in this column, and here's the calories per kilo of body weight that they should be taking in. So in February, we took that as a baseline measure. We instructed them to try to start bringing their weight down. They were supposed to come down about 1 kilo to 1.5 kilos was the instructions. And we just said, do it the way you normally do it. So whatever process they would use, and what most of them would do is they would just increase the number of hours that they were doing exercise every day. So when they had to go to a workout, instead of taking their car to the workout, they would run or bike or things like that. So they were trying to burn an extra 500 to 1,000 calories a day through adding additional exercise. So now March comes along, and we can see that most of them have managed to get their weight down a little bit. Some, the amount that we wanted, some a little bit more, some a little bit less. But take a look at what happened to their metabolic rates. So you can see everybody's calories per day dropped. And more importantly, the number we pay most attention to is this calories per kilo. So you can see the difference here. 25.6, 26.1, 28.5, 27.4. Here's a big drop, 30.2 down to 24.9. So even in these experienced athletes who have spent years of their lives being able to lose weight to get down into their weight category, we were seeing these drops in metabolic rate. And that's pretty problematic. And when we start seeing, so if we flip here onto this slide, now you can see this is body composition changes. So we did skin fold measures, which are the fat pinches that some of you may be familiar with. And you can see that for most of them, not a lot of change. Some small changes, so that even though their body weights have come down, a lot of it didn't come from fat. So what that really suggests is that these changes in metabolic rate that we're seeing here had to be through the loss of lean tissue. What's interesting is when they did their performance tests, nobody would improve from February to March. So they put in a whole month of their lives into their training for their sport without really seeing any improvement in their performance as they were trying to bring their weight down. So what we did is we instituted, based on a lot of the weight loss research that was out there and some of this new information on nutrient timing, and we do have a nutrient timing talk up here on the site as well that you should probably take a listen to, because it sort of fills in and expands on some of the topics here in this energy neutral talk. But we instituted this energy neutral policy, and what that meant was they were no longer going to use their exercise sessions to burn calories. The exercise sessions were designed to improve their fitness, improve their strength, improve their muscle mass, and improve their performance. That's the goal of your exercise sessions, to make yourself better. So in the energy neutral training, what that meant was, since they could no longer use the exercise session as a calorie burning tool, that from a period 60 minutes before the exercise session to a period 60 minutes after the exercise session, all the calories they were going to burn up had to be put back. So they had to eat right before their exercise session. Some of them would take, or use some sort of a shake or a sport drink or something during the exercise session, and anything that was left over, as far as the number of calories that they had burned, had to be put back within 60 minutes afterwards, so that there was no energy deficit created by the exercise session itself. And then we created this negative energy balance through the rest of the day simply by adjusting what they were eating a little bit. So they would make small adjustments in the total amount of food that they were taking in. And here's what we saw. Redid the resting metabolic rates in April. So as you can see, most of them, again, their weights are down a little bit, not necessarily a whole lot. But take a look at what happened here with their metabolic rates. So if their body weights have either decreased or stabilized, look at these metabolic rates. They've jumped up to even higher levels than they were in February. So by going to energy neutral training, what they've actually managed to do was maximize what they were getting out of their exercise sessions. So they were actually building more muscle tissue. And we know this because we also saw in our April performance tests, every single one of them had a personal best, an all-time personal best. Now what's really interesting, so some of you are probably looking at it, well, weight didn't change that much. But look at this. You can see out here much bigger drops or continued drops in skin folds. So even though the number on the scale may not have changed as much as in the previous month, the drop in actual fat is greater. So this group was able to lose fat and increase their performance at the same time, even though their weight only changed a little bit. So it's not necessarily about the number on the scale, but they were able to lose body fat and increase their metabolism or keep their metabolism high at the same time. And why does this happen? Well, we know that during and post-exercise, protein synthesis rates are the highest at any point during the day. And protein synthesis is really the process of building up new proteins in the body, whether that's muscle tissue proteins or parts within the cells that help you adapt to your cardio training. Protein synthesis is necessary for any of the positive improvements that go on in your body as a result of exercise to occur. And those only can occur when you have both adequate energy, adequate carbohydrate, and adequate protein intake. And what we know is that protein and carbohydrate intake increases insulin levels, which decreases cortisol levels. So it's also helping out this eating right around the workout. This is part of the nutrient timing component of this. This eating right around the workout time or the exercise time actually decreases your levels of stress hormones and allows new muscle tissue to continue to be built. And this ends up preventing the catabolic effects of exercise. So exercise is normally a breakdown process. You're putting stress on the body, you're increasing the energy demand, so things have to be broken down in order to do that. And exercise creates this catabolic effect, but then it also stimulates that build-up process if you have the nutrients and the energy there to allow your body to do it and to adapt to that stress that you've created. What was also interesting, and this has been found in several other weight loss studies as well, like just done in average people, is that in women in particular, anytime you create a negative energy balance during exercise, it increases your appetite. And this is a big problem in any sort of a weight loss scenario, since appetite control is one of the toughest things. You start getting hungry and you're only going to deal with this hunger for a certain period of time. You only have so much willpower before you go out and start eating, and very often eating more than you wanted. So what all 6 of these women found, and it's consistent, as I said, with what's been seen in other research studies, is that by staying energy neutral during exercise, they weren't as hungry through the rest of the day. So it actually made it easier for them to eat less throughout the day and adjust their calorie intake through the rest of the day down a little bit. So they were able to cut off, 500 calories or 300 calories a day out of the rest of their eating because they weren't as hungry. They removed this source of appetite stimulation, meaning the exercise session, and it made it so much easier for them to get through lower amounts of calories the rest of the day. So this is all fine and dandy, but now how do you apply the concept to yourself? Well, there's several things you need to know. First of all, you need to know what your total energy expenditure is, and this is going to be your resting metabolic rate, your exercise energy expenditure, and this gives us our total of your daily energy expenditure. Now, there is an RMR calculator on the website. exercise.com. So you can go into the weight loss section of the website here, and there is a resting metabolic rate calculator for you. Answer a few questions, fill in the information that's required, and it's going to give you your total calories that you need for the day. Then you need to figure out what your energy cost for exercise is. And if you're following our program, we focus more on strength exercises than cardio exercises during the weight loss program. And we do that simply because there is research out there that shows that cardio-based programs, even if you are being energy neutral, potentially can be decreasing your muscle mass. Whereas a strength training, a resistance training type program will actually maintain or improve muscle mass and the total amount of weight that you've lost. But some people like to do the cardio. And so if you decide you are going to do cardio, you can look at the cardio equipment itself and the calories burned. As long as you can enter your body weight into the machine, the calories burned are usually fairly accurate, particularly for bikes and treadmills. When you get onto ellipticals, stair climbers, and things like that, the accuracy is, significantly less. But for bikes and treadmills, the formulas to estimate the calories you're burning, as long as you can enter your body weight, are usually pretty accurate. If you're doing strength training, typical values for a strength training exercise and what you should plan on as part of this energy neutral process is usually between about 180 and 250 calories for a 60-minute strength training session. So if you plan it out to be somewhere around 200 calories an hour for your strength training sessions, then you're pretty much in the ballpark with what you need, and that's the amount of calories you need to put back in around that 60-minute pre, 60-minute post session. And then this takes a little bit of planning. And for some people, this is actually the hardest part, is just simply sitting down and saying, okay, I need to figure out if I'm going to work and then I'm going to do an exercise session immediately after work. You need to have something planned to get in those calories that you need in that period of time from 60 minutes before that exercise session through to 60 minutes after that exercise session. So you need to plan this a little bit in advance and make sure you have the nutrients that you need available to you and the calories you need available to you immediately before or immediately after the exercise session. So, as I said, this just becomes a matter of a little bit of time management. And in many cases, in most cases, taking these calories in around the exercise session in liquid form is the best way to go about doing it anyway. And there are all kinds of recovery drink type products on the market right now. As long as it's got a combination of both carbohydrates and protein, you're doing well. You can get a little more specific information if you really want to try to dial this in on percentages of carbohydrates and proteins and things like that. There's some articles on the site on pre-post workout nutrition, as well as the webinar on nutrient timing gets into a little more detail on these things. So in summary, this approach that we use called energy neutral training is really the key to long-term weight loss. It's not a quick fix. It requires some thought, requires some planning, but it really helps people overcome some of the problems associated with other weight loss programs. Energy neutral training prevents that rebound hunger, prevents the loss of muscle mass, and it prevents the decrease in metabolic rate that's typically seen with other exercise programs. I'd like to thank you for having listened to our energy neutral training webinar. For other information and programs, both individualized programs and tracking of daily physical activity, be sure to surf around the site. And if you have any questions, you can go to our Facebook page, and we're always happy to answer them.